Our top story tonight, the locals consider it a secret gap in border security, a sand trail in the Gulf visible only during low tide. It links the U.S. and Mexico at the mouth of the Rio Grande River.
Border correspondent Oscar Margain spoke to fishermen who say anyone can easily walk back and forth between the two countries without getting caught by authorities.
At the south end of Boca Chica Beach, where the Gulf water meets the Rio Grande River, there is a corner of the border where fishermen like to gather.
Us fishermen will come every day.
32-year-old René knows the area well. He has fished here since he was 8.
You know, that's what I love to do.
He says it's a popular spot for both Mexican and American fishermen because fish collect in this basin, which is surrounded by a sand barrier between the sea and the mouth of the river. Here, the border lines are blurred.
Do you see all those birds? Pelicans? Well, that's a strip right there.
Like a sandbar?
Yeah, that's a strip. So you could actually walk. You go through over there, that's the entrance.
So one can literally, at low tide, can cross all the way.
Absolutely.
To those who frequent this area, it seems obvious.
It looks like an easy spot.
Juan Olivo says it gets crowded on weekends, especially on the Mexican side. And although he and his wife come here to leave their worries behind, they like to keep a watchful eye on things.
People can do a lot of stuff through here. Come out here and go around and do that.
Both Juan and René say it's safe in Boca Chica. Authorities are often seen patrolling the area.
Even at night they do it. I mean, they're patrolling 24/7.
And to prove it, we put them to the test. We returned a week later. Up the only paved road out of Boca Chica is a border patrol checkpoint. 2 agents man the post even as early and as late as 4 a.m. But back at the beach that morning, the only people in Boca Chica are Mexican fishermen. We even caught some on a boat net fishing in U.S. waters. It was then that I decided to swim across and talk to them.
Buenos días.
As they stand on the sandbar, these men claim to be fishing on the Mexican side, but they admit that the low tide can allow them sometimes to walk up to the U.S. The sandbar is not always obvious to the naked eye, and depending on water levels, one must swim to get to the other side. I made it across to the U.S. side in less than 5 minutes, with no presence or signs of any law enforcement keeping me from making it to this side. Here, there is no border fence, just a narrow stretch of river and then a sand trail. It's a little known secret told only at Mother Nature's discretion. Border Patrol assures that there are other measures in place, including sensors and cameras in addition to the patrols to keep this corner of the border secure. In Boca Chica Beach near the Texas-Mexico border, Oscar Margain reporting.
So many brave men and women fought for our country, but for some, even military service hasn't been enough to earn citizenship.
Border correspondent Oscar Margain and photographer Jose Sanchez bring us the story of 2 U.S. military veterans who served decades ago, yet still struggle with their immigrant status.
Welcome to Nuevo Progreso, a small, vibrant town on the Mexican side of the border. But despite it being one of the more violent regions in Mexico, hundreds of Americans cross the Progreso International Bridge every day to get there. Of course, most make it a day trip. One of the exceptions is Jose Maria Martinez.
This is what it's all about, right here. Nothing else.
A decorated U.S. Marine who isn't allowed back.
I got deported 15 years ago.
Jose Maria was born in Mexico in 1949. At age 7, he says, he was brought to the U.S. by his parents.
When I crossed the river in 1956 with my family, we were legally, had a green card.
And by age 19, he heard his calling to fight for a country he deemed his in Vietnam.
It is the young men of our Navy Marine Corps team that we will see firsthand today in Vietnam.
When I signed on that dotted line, it was not just for a certain amount of time. It was for life. That's your good conduct medal, Vietnamese service medal.
But after 6 years, his service came to an end and moved back to South Texas. He started a family.
That's my daughter and my granddaughter.
But his struggle with PTSD continued. An urge for adrenaline, he says, led him to become a drug mule.
I smuggled twice and I got caught.
Jose Maria spent the following 5 years in prison. He was deported to Nuevo Progreso and stripped from his benefits in 2002.
They said, you didn't take the oath. I said, I took the oath to serve. I took the oath to die for my country. Is that not enough oath? I said, no.
This is it. This is where I feel safe.
Margain Cáceres was also born in Mexico, but unlike Jose Maria, she didn't serve during time of war. However, while deployed to Germany in the early 1980s, she was led to believe she would become an American after her tour.
I spoke with my CEO, and he said that we're going to work on it and we're going to give you your citizenship.
But that paperwork never made it back to the U.S. She's remained a legal resident ever since.
They assume that just because you are a veteran, you're a citizen already.
She says her anxiety worsened after one of her neighbors was taken in a recent immigration roundup by customs agents. Margain says she walks a straight line, knowing she could too one day be deported.
That's the worst part. That's the worst part. It's not going to go away until the problem is solved or until I get my citizenship.
Is that shocking to you?
It's shocking. I just can't imagine anything more un-American.
Freshman Congressman Vicente Gonzalez represents a district with about 40,000 veterans, many of whom enlisted as non-citizens.
They come home, they make a minor mistake, and next thing they're deported.
Specialist Barajas, founder and director of the Deported Veteran Support House.
The Deported Veteran Support House, an organization based in Tijuana, Mexico, says it has tracked 318 deported veterans across 36 countries, but estimates the real number to be in the thousands. While the Defense Department says about 18,000 non-citizens currently serve in the armed forces.
I behaved and I've done nothing wrong with the hope that the government will realize that, yeah, we screwed up, but I paid. I paid completely.
At the end of the day, that's all the 67-year-old says he is fighting for, his benefits and a chance to visit his family freely.
It's funny how something so small can claim so much of your life.
Congressman Gonzalez met with top White House officials this week to discuss a bill that would repatriate deported veterans. Now, his office feels confident that they can work something out with President Trump. In Progreso, on the Texas-Mexico border, I'm Oscar Margain reporting.
In such heavily Democratic territory like Deep South Texas, showcasing your support for President Donald Trump isn't always easy.
Well, that's right, especially when you take your support out on the road for all to see. KENS 5 border correspondent Oscar Margain explains.
I voted for Trump, and I didn't think he was going to win. I was happy that he made it, and I just wanted people to know how I felt about it.
About 2 months ago, Raymond Rojas had this sign made in support of President Trump. It's usually displayed on his property, but when the mood strikes, he takes the sign on the road.
That's freedom of speech.
During today's trip,
I'm videotaping you guys too.
It compelled this lady to stop and confront Raymond and his wife.
Who do you want Trump to give him help?
Give help to all those people that are against his, the way he wants to, what he wants to do for the country. And those that are opposing him, give them help.
Well, I guess that makes me one of them.
Hey, what is running back? We've had people, just say nasty things. We've had people come ask me if they can take a picture of it.
Supporting President Trump and his policies can draw some backlash, especially in blue regions along the border.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm looking for Mr. Luis Sepulveda.
One of the reasons why so many companies looking to build the border wall try keeping a low profile.
So dale gas, Trump. Vas bien. Give him hell.
Vangela Churchill is one of the few around here who, like Raymond, like to display support for Trump.
I get flipped off. I get honked at. People cut me off.
She understands why, when it comes to supporting a border wall, many on the border prefer to keep to themselves.
And I think he's doing a good job. We just have to give him time.
Raymond says he's keeping his sign up for the foreseeable future. Now, he plans to change that message soon to something that supports building the border wall. In Edinburgh, near the Texas-Mexico border, Oscar Margain reporting.
Well, tonight the government's soliciting bids to build the border wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. And one of the biggest remaining hurdles, private property.
But as border correspondent Oscar Margain reports, there are some landowners willing to give up their land for the sake of security.
There's history, there's sentimental value. There's all kinds of things involved with this piece of property here. I mean, we've been on it more than 250 years.
Down a dead-end road in Roma, Texas, Vietnam veteran and lifelong rancher Ruperto Escobar welcomes us to his family property passed down for 7 generations.
Yo soy Ruperto, Oscar.
We became interested in talking to Ruperto when word got out that there was a South Texas man offering up his property for President Trump's border wall. And apparently he's not alone.
Our country comes first before anything else, and if we have to protect it, we'll protect it one way or another.
Absolutely. That's same way I feel, buddy.
Landowners along the border like Ruperto usually keep to themselves, but he's one of many Trump supporters that are now speaking up.
There's bunches of Hispanics up and down this border that even though this is a blue area, we don't go along with the blue ideology when it comes to something like that, when it comes to securing our borders.
Ruperto shows us his 75-acre ranch, where the wall may one day be built.
This gate was knocked down, I don't know how many times, right here.
Land, Ruperto says, has been abused by Mexican cartels, and law enforcement considers a hotbed for drug and human smuggling.
That's the way it's always been here, Oscar. Ever since that border became the place to cross contraband through.
Now here's an example of how open the border is in Stark County. The only thing separating Miguel Alemán, Mexico and Roma, Texas is this river. In fact, once you make it across, all you have to do is walk a few feet undetected before you reach this dollar store and blend in with the rest of the public.
Here, there is no border fence, but rather a heavy presence of state and federal law enforcement accompanied by technology. It's what many call the virtual wall, which Ruperto favors. But if that doesn't secure the border enough, Ruperto is willing to help with a few conditions.
Compensate me well for it. Give me access to the river. Don't shut me off. Don't come and treat me like this country did the Indians.
From the Texas-Mexico border, Oscar Margain, KENS 5 Eyewitness News.
With Cuban politics once again making news, we tend to think of Miami as the port of choice for Cuban immigrants.
But it turns out Texas attracts them too, many of whom have made a long trip through Central America. As KENS 5 border reporter Oscar Margain explains, dozens of Cuban immigrants have been stuck on our border after traveling from Havana to the port of Hidalgo.
Cuban migrant William Avila looked desperate last night after spending nearly 72 hours waiting on the U.S. side of this international bridge, along with at least 30 other Cubans. He says men, women, and children were told to wait until agents cleared other immigrants for processing. That wait turned into days and nights. Luis Lopez says he's come for the political asylum offered by the U.S. government, but never imagined he needed to endure this. Despite Fidel Castro's death while en route to the border, these Cubans believe the regime they fled is still alive. Estandar Chacon says he traveled 37 days in 9 countries to get here. So turning back and walking to Mexico was not an option. He fears Mexican authorities would deport them. He says they even took their money, so he preferred to wait rather than risk falling into the hands of organized crime. But there were moments of temporary relief. People on both sides of the border responding to the scene with acts of kindness, donating clothes and bringing them a warm beverage. Just like them, he could one day be in their place, said Ivan Lopez, who, along with his wife and children, helped bring food from neighboring Reynosa to help what he called their brothers. Tonight, it's a different story, as word that U.S. Customs agents finally moved the group indoors. The agency responded saying these Cuban migrants were not deemed high risk. and were given resources to get help from the Mexican government. They also say they looked at each port's capacity, like the Hidalgo port of entry, to ensure the health and safety of arriving aliens. In Hidalgo, at the Texas-Mexico border, Oscar Margain reporting.